Hello and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. Today we're going to be discussing innovation in the fintech scene, specifically within the UK and its relation to how research and development is hopefully going to further that. So joining me, I've actually brought on Dom Bartholdi from GovGrant. Dom, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks Doug. Thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And I guess really to kick things off, let's, for our viewers, could you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself, your role, and GovGrant, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm responsible for the commercial activity at GovGrant, and we consult with innovative businesses and help them to commercialise their intellectual property and access government funding and optimise the incentives that they use from the government. And we've been doing that since 2006. So we've been around for quite some time. We've seen a lot of interesting companies and a lot of boom and bust, and especially boom in fintech.
Yeah, well, if we could focus on fintech, I mean, being placed there from 2006 must give you guys some brilliant insights. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask, when it comes to innovation, how would you describe the UK fintech environment in comparison to maybe other industries?
Yeah, UK fintech is obviously, it's a really successful industry, and that's both on a local scale in the UK and also looking outwards on an international level as well. And there's a number of reasons for that, but certainly when you look at how financial technology has been embraced and the businesses that have actually invested, both the existing analog companies that have invested in digitization and financial technology, and also the sort of digital startup businesses that have contributed as well. It really is a very fast growth and very, very innovative sector. Other industry sectors rather have not had to invest in the same way in digitization. I'm sure they will, but fintech's a bit of a standout for that. And to that point, we've conducted a survey, an Innovation Nation report we call it, and we found that 87% of fintechs do believe that their work is innovative. And the highest number of respondents who said their work was innovative on some level were those in engineering and building, which was 92%. So when it comes to being sort of highly innovative, no more than a third of respondents in any sector felt that this was the case for their current activities. Just 23% of manufacturers and 9% in medtech claiming that was the case. So that said, figures from HMRC indicate that UK fintech companies are not taking advantage of tax relief that's out there that could support the growth of their business, which could be hindering innovation efforts and limiting potential. But really what's interesting about the financial technology space or the finance sector is that the data showed us that finance insurance companies are claiming the highest value proportion of patent box relief. This is based on HMRC stats. So 34% of the total pot in the year 17-18, which is the latest figures available, which totals up to about £350 million, and only 10 companies made that claim, made those claims rather. So what that tells us is that the financial sector is being very innovative, and they are taking very significant benefit from some of the government incentive schemes, but it's a very small number of actual businesses doing it. So it shows there's a huge continued opportunity for financial technology businesses to get involved in those government incentives, especially around patent box, noting that the majority of these financial service and insurance sector businesses are conducting software-based innovation. So there is a bit of a gap and more to be done, but really fintech is blazing a bit of a trail compared to some of the other industries around.
It does kind of lend itself to this image of how hungry fintechs are to disrupt maybe some of the more traditional financial players in the industry. Now, with that in mind, then, I think it's fair to say that the UK has grasped fintech very strongly, maybe in comparison to other mature financial markets that are nearby. With that in mind, why do you think the UK has adapted its economy to really look after the fintech scene in comparison to other markets nearby?
Well, there's a bit of a perfect storm, really, and I wouldn't want to wax lyrical too much about why fintech has boomed as much as it has, but certainly the government and the FCA have got a bit of a role to play in that. They've been quite pro digitization and pro fintech, so they have taken down some of the blockers. They could do a lot more, but they've taken down some of those and actually encouraged that disruption. So that combined with the fact that socially there's been a big desire for change from the consumers, so the consumers of those financial products, and also the fact that there's been a big sort of Apple boom, or not Apple if you're into the other side of Android technology, but that boom has meant that everything's at people's fingertips. So they're much more used to consuming in a digital way, and that sort of all comes together in a way that's been quite useful for financial technology. And I think the other thing as well is, if you look at the financial industry, they are, as denoted by the claims on patent box relief, there's some serious innovation going on in those businesses, and it is around software, but it's an open door for sort of born digital financial technology businesses to step in and keep those traditional businesses honest. And to some extent, they can then take on board the technologies that are delivered by those financial technology companies. But to others, they're going to compete with them, as you've seen from challenger banks. So it's a good environment to be in. Lots of innovation and R&D happening, and some government incentives around it to do that. But as I say, the government could certainly do more.
Interesting. Now, speaking about what the government can do more, we've recently seen the Khalifa report, and I'd be really interested to get your perspective on that and what the UK fintech scene can do now post-Brexit that you can see from this report.
Yeah, so the Khalifa report, which was a long-awaited independent review, which was commissioned by Rishi Sunak and landed at the end of Feb 2021. It makes some really crucial insights into the continued growth of the financial technology sector. And for us, it really did hit the nail on the head that there are more innovation incentives required from the government. The government needs to do more to back it. And it does call to expand the scope of R&D tax credits, for example. And it also highlights other things that we could do for financial technology, such as including financial data sets as qualifying expenditure, but we're not quite there yet. It does miss a bit of a trick though with regard to patent box. It mentions it, but it doesn't really highlight that there's a huge opportunity for financial technology companies. Fintechs are not capitalizing on their IP because they're stopping short of using patents to actually commercialize their intellectual property. So they might recognize there's some there and there's a value of it, but they don't actually go ahead and commercialize that. It's more for protection reasons. So really for us, not only does the IP sort of create value to allow people sort of tapping into patent box as a funding incentive, but there's also the spillover effect that comes from exploiting your intellectual property, which is that more skilled people are employed in and around the business, in and around the UK economy, but also the other sparks that can come off the side of it and the extra value that's created. And ultimately, this all drives to value for those fintech companies. So those that are looking to drive value and exit, these are all things that add significant value in terms of pound notes, as well as in terms of to the UK economy and growth, provided that it's actually embraced fully.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really key in the next coming years to see how much the government does look to kind of embrace it, as you say. With that in mind, you've touched on a few points there, but how would you recommend that the government actually follow through, embrace the fintech scene, and help the industry out in the UK in particular?
Yeah, of course. So, from our side, there are four very clear things that the government could do to really add rocket fuel to the R&D and patent box scheme here in the UK. And number one is to increase the enhancement rate to 150% to help businesses benefit from R&D tax specifically that's talking about. And also to do more for the owner managed businesses. These people who are innovating all day, every day, but not taking a salary because they're dedicating their lives to innovation through R&D. Those people aren't recognised, supported when it comes to tax breaks, and they should be. And also to a third point, to widen the scope of tax credits to include other industries such as the social sciences. and as I mentioned before, to also include data and various forms of data as a contributing qualifying expense when it comes to R&D tax, because when it comes to digital businesses, data consumption is essential to the R&D process and often overlooked. And by HMRC, it's not currently included. And the fourth and final point from us is really for the scheme to work harder to bridge the gap between research and development and intellectual property. Inventive companies need the government's help to commercialise their inventions. If you look outside of the UK, if you look at the people just around us and our own targets, we're way behind where we should be. At the moment, 1.7% of gross domestic product is invested back into R&D. The government's target is 2.4%. But if you look at some of our European neighbours, Sweden, Austria, Denmark, Germany already put more than 3% of their GDP into R&D. And if you look further outside that and you look into Asia, and the real sort of AI and fintech powerhouses that are being developed there, you've got children's school books teaching about intellectual property and how to do it in China. We're way behind some of our fellow countries in incentivizing innovation, and we need to really step it up, especially now in the face of Brexit, which has been somewhat overshadowed by the pandemic. But we stand on our own now, and we now need to make sure we're counted from an innovation perspective. So, businesses aren't really seeing the woods for the trees at the moment when it comes to identifying their R&D. They're too close to the process, they consider it normal. And if people step back from it and the process is made more simple, so they can actually go, look, this is my intellectual property and this is how I can commercially take advantage of that, they'll be in a much better place, and UK PLC will benefit very much from that.
Interesting. Now, I want to ask, and maybe as well for some of our viewers that might not be aware of what commercializing your intellectual property can do.
Yeah.
Specifically when it comes to fintechs, what will it do, and why is it so critical to commercialize your intellectual property?
Yeah, so what's important about commercializing the intellectual property, as I mentioned earlier, is more about taking advantage of the opportunities that are there already on the doorstep. So with the Innovation Nation report that I referred to earlier that GovGrant conducted, which reached out to 500 sort of C-level businesses that are in scope for these sorts of technologies, it found that 84% of fintech leaders think that it's a good idea to secure patents for protection purposes, but less than a third see it as a priority to commercialize their IP. So that picture really needs to change urgently, because for many businesses, the IP is actually central to successful development of their proposition. And not only in terms of the technology they're delivering and the services they're providing, but also in terms of the contribution towards valuation at the end of it, as mentioned. I think it's most important to consider the residual value that's created for a fintech business when actually taking your intellectual property and mapping out a route to either get into patent box, and take the 10% corporation tax rate that will give, but also to benefit from the spillover and the cross-skilling and the general improvement in having innovative and intelligent people around the pitch to add value to the company, especially in face of the increasing corporation tax rate that's coming down the line in the next few years. These incentives and the UK patent box scheme is still actually one of the best, but the route to it is very, very clunky for some, and that's what needs to change. And pulling away some of the myths around what your intellectual property is and what to do with it is one of them. The government can help with that by making the patent application process a lot easier. But the other thing is that the businesses have to recognise themselves there's a lot of value in it. Everyone knows there's value in IP because you don't buy machines anymore so much. But it's actually recognising what that means and trying to put a value on that by taking immediate commercial value from it. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, speaking of kind of removing some of the barriers to entry, I think that's something that fintech is almost categorized for doing when it comes to finance. Now, how do you think fintechs will then play a role in solving some of the issues that the UK is facing post-Brexit, and obviously the fact that we've had a global pandemic as well?
Yeah, well, we're really lucky to have such a strong fintech sector, and I think it was the Khalifa report that said we're at another inflection point with fintech here in the UK. You know, we've blazed a trail to some degree, and now we're at a point where we've got to go again, and the government needs to really back that. I think the important thing about it is that during the pandemic, certainly the big financial institutions have been hit hard. You know, and they've seen a drop off in profits, and they've probably had to accelerate to a larger degree the taking on the digitization of their businesses. So as much as, you know, we've all been working from home and we've had to embrace technology, so have those bigger financial organizations. And because we've got the right ecosystem and the skill base here already, the British and the UK fintech industry is there ready to go to the next phase and to really capitalize on that. So I think it's going to be important that the commercialization of IP within the fintech sector does play an important role in changing our fortunes. You know, and keeps opening up a world of funding for years to come. You know, the more activity there is, the more noise it makes, the more activity it will create, and hopefully the more attention it will get from the UK government. And I think it will be invaluable to businesses navigating the uncertainty caused by Brexit and COVID-19. You know, bringing in that investment whilst sort of simultaneously encouraging investment to take place within the UK borders is really important, and it's key to our economic recovery and also long-term prosperity of the UK.
Well, with that in mind then, to kind of put things into real terms, and I always like to try and actually get a use case that we can actually start actioning from these conversations. So with that in mind, what are the main priorities for fintechs themselves in the next 6 months to really either facilitate this change from the government, or at least on their own terms, try and improve their own standing? And do you think the pandemic's changed some of those priorities?
Maybe it's shifted some of them forward a little bit. I think the pandemic's brought a lot of things into focus for people, but what's true still is that there's a huge opportunity left on the table for fintech businesses in the UK. And the most important thing that I'd like fintech businesses to take away from this is that there is a huge value to intellectual property in the business that exists that needs to be looked at, and understanding there is a value more than just protection is absolutely critical. The other thing is that there are numerous incentives out there for financial technology businesses. I think they all across the board need improving. That has been underlined by the Khalifa report, but they are still there and available for the majority of businesses to take advantage of. So I would urge fintech businesses to make sure that they are optimizing all of the innovation incentives that are available to them. As I said earlier, the UK fintech is at an inflection point, and the pandemic has increased the speed of digitization. So we now need the government to step up and really back those businesses by improving the level of funding and support in terms of its breadth, as in what it covers, but also in terms of who it covers and who it can support, to make sure that UK fintech stays an international force as it is today.
Well, it sounds absolutely exciting time, really, for fintech, but especially within the UK. That kind of going out on your own mentality is well, I think pretty evident in the fintech scene, as we're seeing from the Khalifa report. So Dom, I think that's actually all we have time for. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed yourself too. I certainly have. Excellent. Well, to the rest of viewers, you can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you there. Thank you very much, and goodbye.